Welcome everyone. This is 9.3 using the quadratic formula to solve equations. So we learned already how to solve equations using factoring, right? That's not going to go away. That's module 8, right? That's not going away. We're just adding something. If you come across something that's unfactorable, then so something that's not factorable, right? Then we're going to use a quadratic formula. So there's only essentially two ways to solve for equations. One is factoring, which we outline, and using the special forms, along with this way, quadratic formula. So let's cover it. You guys probably seen this before, the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over, I can't emphasize that enough, it's all over 2a. Not just the b squared minus 4ac or not just the negative b, but it's all over 2a. Okay, so everything that's in my numerator is going to be divided by 2a. So what is a, b, and c? If you solve, make one side equal to 0, okay, that is your a. Your a is always going to be the coefficient that is next to the x squared. B is always going to be with x, and C is your constant. Okay, so all we're going to do is just pick out those numbers, plug it into this formula, and then do some math, right? Simplify it, and then bada bing, bada boom, you have your answer. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, really simple, and let's just practice a little bit. Yes. Yeah. The bottom one is how you get your A, your B, or C. This is in, yeah. Okay. So all we're going to do is plug in A, B, and C into the equation and just simplify it, right? Or the formula. Okay. So before we go over how to use that and practice that, we're going to go over the steps to solving equations first. Okay. So the steps are, first step in any of these solving quadratics is make one side equal to 0. Okay, preferably making x squared positive. Okay, preferably making x squared positive. You can make it negative, but then it'll just make the math that much more difficult for you. So try to make that positive, even though you might have to subtract or add more. Okay. The second step is to use the special forms to factor. Remember the two special forms that we've learned already? A squared minus b squared equals a plus b, a minus b. And then a squared plus or minus 2ab plus b squared equals a plus or minus this plus or minus here is going to be the exact same thing as this plus or minus. Okay, so if this is a plus, this is a plus. If this is a minus, this is a minus. A plus or minus b quantity squared. All right, that's the second step. And if that step does not work, or if there's no special forms, then we're going to look to using the x method to factor. And if that doesn't work, we're going to use the quadratic formula, and then we're just going to solve for the variable, right? After these 5 steps, you guys should have the, essentially, you guys should have the answer, right? Or the solution. Okay, so I'll give you guys some time to write that out, and I'll have this up. Okay. So those are the steps to solving these guys. And I have a handful of examples for us to do. And then we're going to talk about something else and then we'll be done. Okay. So my first example here is 9x squared plus 3x minus 2 equals 0. Okay. So my first step is to make one side equal to 0, which it already is. So we're good with that. Right. My right-hand side is 0. Are there any special forms? So when you look at the special forms, notice that A and B are always squared, right? Yeah, so I'm going to look for perfect squares. Is 9x squared a perfect square? Sure it is. It's 3x quantity squared, right? 3 squared is 9, x squared is x squared. Is 2 a perfect square? No. So we don't have a special form. Does that make sense? Yeah, we can check it, but that doesn't work. Can we use the x method? Let's see. Really quick in your head, 9 times 2 is, or 9 times negative 2 is negative 18, and a product of, or a sum of 3. Is there, or are there two numbers that make me a product of negative 18 and gets me a sum of 3? 6, negative 3. Awesome. 6 and negative 3. So now we can proceed to use the x method. Okay? So here, 9x squared, here, negative 2 equals 0. And in this 3x, remember the pro tip, if you have a positive and a negative number, put the negative number here and put the positive number here, just so that you don't have to pull out that negative. Okay. So then those two guys are grouped together and you can't really see that. These two guys are grouped together and these two guys are grouped together. And what's in common between 9x squared and a negative 3x? Huh? 9x squared and a negative 3x. A 3 and an x, right? So I pull out the 3x, I get x minus 1. What's in common between a 6x and a negative 2? Huh? What's in common between a 6x and a negative 2? 2, right? Oh no, 3. 3x squared. Or 3x minus 1. Huh? A 6x and a 2, you can take out a 2. So we get a 3x minus 1 again equals 0. Now remember, when we factor, these two parentheses must be the same thing. Okay, if they are not, then you did something incorrect and look above to see what you did wrong. Okay? So 3x minus 1 in parentheses times 3x plus 2 equals 0. So then 3x minus 1 equals 0, or 3x plus 2 equals 0. And then we're going to go ahead and solve. We're going to add 1 to both sides. 3x equals 1. Divide by 3, divide by 3, x equals 1/3. Or subtract 2, subtract 2. 3x equals negative 2. Divide by 3, divide by 3, x equals negative 2/3. Okay, so that is how you solve it, right? Notice that we didn't even touch quadratic formula yet because we didn't need it. Okay. All right. Okay. So my next example, we have this. So my first step again is to make one side equal to 0. Since this is positive, I'm going to move everything over to the left. So that means I'm going to subtract 4 and add x. Subtract 4 and add x. When we do this, we need to make this in descending order. Okay, so 4x squared plus x minus 4 equals 0. Okay. And then we have my next step. Is there any special form? 4x squared is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square, but this is a minus, right? So if there's a minus, notice that the special form has the plus b squared, right? So that's not going to work. So there's no special form. Let's try and use the x method. 4 times 4 is 16. So two numbers that multiplies to negative 16 and adds up to 1. Are there two numbers that multiply to negative 16 and adds to 1? Take your time. What two numbers adds up to 16 or multiplies to 16? 1 and 16, right? 4 and 4. That won't work. 1 and 16 will not work. 2 and 8. No, that won't work. So there is none, right? We cannot use the x method because there is no combination. So now we're going to use the quadratic formula, okay? Just a reminder, I'm going to write it out here. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? And remember that my a is always with the x squared. My b value is always with my x. What's this invisible? There's no number there, but there's an x present. So what is this? What number is this invisible number? Huh? Yeah, 1, right? And then my c value will always just be the constant, okay? Which is negative 4. You take that sign with it, okay? So x equals negative 1 plus or minus square root. B squared is 1 squared minus 4 times 4 times 4, negative 4, all over 2 times 4, right? Just plugging it in and going from there, right? My A, my B, my C. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus square root 1. What's 4 times 4 times 4? What's 4 times 4? 16 times 4. 4. 64. Right? Yeah. Negative and a negative make a positive, so that's plus 64 over 8. right? 2 times 4 is 8. And so we have x equals -1 plus or minus square root of 65 over 8. Now with this square root of 65, yeah, we have to break it down, okay? Do we all know how to break down radicals? We did this before, like the middle of semester 1, right? So 65 breaks out to be, I'm going to factor tree this, 5 and 15, right? 5 times 15 is 65. Yeah. 5 times 15? No. 5 times 13, right? Not 15, 13. So since there are no combinations to take out, that will just be your answer. X equals -1 plus or minus square root of 65 over 8. So embedded in this answer, right, there's actually two solutions, correct? You guys see the two solutions? The two solutions would be x equals -1 plus square root of 65 over 8 and x equals -1 minus square root of 65 over 8. The plus or the minus, I just split up. Okay? Cool? Questions? No? All right. Then let's move on to another example. X squared minus 6x minus 7 equals 0. So I make one side equal to 0, which it already is. We're good with that. Are there any special forms? X squared is a perfect square. 7 is not. So there are no special forms. Can I use the x method? Yes? Okay. Two numbers that multiplies to -7 adds up to -6. 7 and 1, right? That's the only combination that I have, right? That multiplies to -7, or that multiplies to 7. So -7 plus 1 is -6, right? So I have x squared minus 7x plus 1x minus 7 equals 0. Gather the first two, gather the last two. Here I can take out an x. So that's x minus 7. Here I can't take out anything, so I'm going to take out that imaginary 1, x minus 7. The reason why I put the 1 there is because of this. X minus 7 times x plus 1. Okay? At the very least, you can take out a 1. Okay, it's not just going to it's never, ever, 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 ever going to just be empty. Okay? Equals 0. So x minus 7 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. And so x equals 7, or x equals -1. Okay? So we can still use the x method, all right? Or we can use the quadratic formula. You guys want to try the quadratic formula on this and see? No? Okay. X method is fine. Yes. Can we do one with the special form? Okay. All right. Now let's move on to this. We're going to make one side equal to 0 because that's my first step. I'm going to move the 8x and the negative 7 over to the left-hand side. So minus 8x, add 7, subtract 8x, add 7. My right-hand side is equal to 0. This would be 2x squared minus 8x plus 7. There are no special forms because this 7 is not a special form, or is not a perfect square, or the 2x squared is not a perfect square as well. So either one would work. Now, check the x method. Adds up to negative 8. Gets me a product of 2 times 7, which is 14. Can you guys come up with the two numbers? Or are there two numbers? Are there two numbers that make a product of 14 and a sum of negative 8? One for yes, two for no. Everybody. One for yes, two for no. I see a bunch of twos. So it's a no, right? The only possibility for 14 is 1 and 14. That's too big. And 7 and 2, right? 2 and 7, which will get me 9, right? Or if you subtract it, would get me 5, right? So that doesn't work. So we have to use a quadratic formula again. So A equals 2, B equals negative 8. Take the sign with it, and C equals 7. So X equals negative B. So it's negative 8 plus or minus the square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So X equals negative times a negative is a positive 8 plus or minus the square root. 8 squared is 64 minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 7 is 56. All over 4. 56 or 64 minus 56 is 8. Right? So now this 8, class, we can break that down. 4 times 2, 2 times 2, right? And in order for a number to get out of my square root, I need a pair. Okay? So since I have 2 2's here, I'm going to take that out. So since since there's a pair of 2's, I can take out that 2, and what's left over is this 2 here. All right? And then the plus or minus 8 over 4. Right? Now, do you guys see that I can cancel stuff out? Yeah. This 4 goes both to the 8 and the 2 square root of 2. So this would be 8 over 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 2 over 4. Okay? So here we have a 2 plus or minus square root of 2 over 2. You can leave it like that, or we can say I want a common denominator of 2. So if the 2 over 1 becomes a common denominator of 2, this is a 4 plus or minus square root of 2. Either one would work. Okay, I'm not going to be a stickler on how to write it out. Okay. Cool. When we're solving, okay, and here's another example. We have 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. When we're solving, we actually don't need this special form. This is a special form. It's a difference of squares, right? When I say special form, I mean the first one here, okay, a squared minus b squared. So this is a perfect square. It becomes 2x squared. 9 is a perfect square. It becomes 3 squared. There's a minus sign between them, so I have this, right? A squared minus b squared. So it breaks out to be a plus b, a minus b. And the reason why I break it down like this is because now I have my a and now I have my b. Okay, so if it's a plus b, a minus b, I know it's 2x3, 2x3 plus and a minus equals 0, right? Yeah, pretty simple. So 2x plus 3 equals 0, or 2x minus 3 equals 0. And then we just go ahead and solve it. If you solve this one, x is going to equal negative 3 halves. If you solve this one, x is going to equal positive 3 halves. Okay? And the reason why, like I said, we don't need to do all of this work is because if we have 4x squared minus 9 equals 0, we could just solve it for x, right? We could add 9 to both sides. 4x squared equals 9. Divide by 4 on both sides. X squared equals 9 over 4. Square root both sides. So we have x equals plus or minus, what's the square root of 9? 3. What's the square root of 4? 2. So this is actually the same thing as these guys, right? We get the same answer. Okay? So when you see this special form, just solve it. Just solve it out like this, and we learned this in 9.1, right? To take the square root. Okay? Let's try and do one more special form. X squared minus 14x plus 49 equals 0. Okay? So when we're looking at special forms, my eyes go straight to the first term and the last term, always. Okay, to see if they're perfect squares, right? If they are, I mean, then I check that middle term. But if they're not, then it's not a special form. Okay? This one's going to be because I just made it up, but x squared is x quantity squared. 49 is 7 squared. Now notice that the middle term is always going to be 2ab, right? So check that as well. So 2 times x times 7, which is A and B, right? X and 7. Does that actually make 14? Yes, it does, right? 2 times 7 is 14x. So that correlates with that. So we do have a special form. And it says A plus or minus B quantity squared. So A is X, B is 7. This sign here, the minus, becomes this sign here. Quantity squared equals 0. Okay. And then here we can square root x minus 7 equals, I don't really need that plus or minus here, but I'm just going to write it out just for you guys to get used to. Whenever I square root, I need a plus or minus. Okay. Plus or minus 0 is the same number anyway. All right. And then I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So x is going to equal 7 plus or minus 0, which is just 7. Okay. Or what you can do from here is just the x method. All right. But that is your quadratic formula 9.3 lesson for today. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one.